Hi there, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we're going to briefly cover helping your highly sensitive child to become resilient because it is such a big topic. I want us to really take some bite-sized focus this week. Personally, because we've just got out of our weekend with our clients and I need to make this short because I've returned to the office today and I have a lot on my plate. So we're going to just be focusing on setting the tone for this conversation, as it's one that we have often on our show. And I will include a word from one of our clients whom we were able to have a brief interview with at the event to solidify some of the conversation that we have here. What I want us to really pay attention to in serving your child to a level of resilience that you might struggle to help them demonstrate is that for sensitive kids, obviously, we know that being sensitive is not a weakness, and yet if your child doesn't know how to regulate their emotions, they can present as if their sensitivity is a weakness. So they show you that they are fragile, they show you that they are struggling, they have a hairpin trigger, you might be walking on eggshells because they're constantly yelling or irritable or angry or overwhelmed, and yet when they're experiencing challenges, they're also saying things like, I can't, I won't, and I don't want to. And so this leads to you to wonder whether or not your child can actually demonstrate resiliency, right? Now, one thing that I want you to take from this short podcast today is that resiliency is not an innate trait. It's actually a learned trait. So most parents will struggle in teaching their sensitive kids to become resilient because they get stuck in looking at their kid's personality as a result of their behavior, right? So if your child is behaving in a way that I just mentioned, they're yelling frequently, they're saying they don't want to, they're shocked by their sibling poking them and surprising them, and they say, ah! And so you look at that behavior and you say to yourself, my child is sensitive. Then what you're doing is you're naming their personality based on their reactivity. And reactivity is actually a behavior symptom of the meltdown cycle. So while you do see, quick, short reactions for sensitive kids, that is actually much more regular and much more frequent for sensitive children who don't know how to manage their emotions. Children who are often surprised or struggle with the ability to tolerate siblings being siblings typically don't have the effective emotion regulation skills or the effective level of resilience in managing surprise. And that actually isn't because they're sensitive. It's because they haven't learned how to be resilient, whether they're sensitive or not. Because some people who are not sensitive can take things personally quickly and have a hairpin trigger. However, when your child is sensitive, you see this much more frequently, right? So we see daily meltdowns for highly sensitive kids. We see daily or multiple times a day outbursts for highly sensitive kids who don't have resiliency skills. And so it can be difficult for you to, as a parent, to determine whether or not your child is sensitive because they're demonstrating this behavior, or they're sensitive at their core in terms of how they experience the world, and then also their behavior fits in a meltdown cycle. So I really want us to just spend a few minutes paying attention to this understanding so that you don't fall into the same trap that a lot of parents do, which is in presuming that the reactivity your child is demonstrating is part of who they are. That's not true. Right? Think about this. Marsha Linehan, who developed DBT, talked about her before. You can go look her up. But she used this fantastic phrase. Being a highly sensitive person without skills is like walking through life without skin. And so if you didn't have skin, and I'll get a little gross here, if you didn't have skin, wouldn't you be disturbed by the wind? Wouldn't you be demonstrating sensitivity by saying ouch often if the wind was blowing on you or your hair tickled you, that wouldn't feel like a tickle, it would feel excruciating, right? So when we think about resiliency as a skill, then we can observe whether or not your child is demonstrating that skill. And I want you to really pay attention to the frequency, the intensity, and the duration within which your child demonstrates resiliency, because resiliency isn't an all or nothing skill. It's like, okay, my kids sometimes, we've heard parents say, my kid's resilient. They can tolerate getting yelled at by the teacher. They're resilient. And if they are constantly yelled at by or poked by siblings, or just sibling exists and they're always on edge, then my answer to you is no, they're not. Sometimes they're demonstrating resiliency. However, in most environments, if your child is struggling, then they certainly have a reduction in the scale that we want to address. Okay, so I want to pay attention to this because it's not like a box that you check when we're talking about resiliency. This is a skill that is grown on a spectrum. And I see a fair amount of parents in two-parent households argue about this. And my child is not resilient. Yes, they are, right? So I want you to look at odds and statistics. Is your child demonstrating flexibility, creative problem solving, and curiosity when they are challenged? About 80 to 90% of the time. That's a demonstration of resiliency. Often what we see is that a sensitive child who's stuck in a meltdown cycle, who really struggles with demonstrating resiliency, they are losing it on a daily basis. And so 80 to 90% of the day might not be, right? Might not be where they're losing it. And yet on a daily basis, that means that 80 to 90% of their days during a week are demonstrating meltdowns. And if your child is struggling at this level beyond age 4, then your child is not demonstrating developmentally appropriate behavior. So it is important to understand where the statistics actually fit when you're gauging your child's capacity. We've heard this before. My parents will call me and they'll say, 95% of the time my kid's fine, and then they lose their mind. Well, I want you to ask yourself, if most of the day is fine for you and then every single day you lose your crap, do you feel good as a person? Do you feel good as a person? Is it possible that you are lacking skills throughout the day that are leading to you stuffing your emotions, and then it's just leaking out in other ways, sideways, if you will, if you just stuff a can and then it just pops the other way, right? People probably, if you had that high of a temper or that low of a spiral and you were struggling, people probably are walking on eggshells in order to not set you off, right? They're probably wondering when you're going to lose it next. And so I want you to notice that that's not appropriate. It's not okay. Your child feels miserable. And this message is to the parents who are wondering whether or not now is the time to address the problem, because I've never had a client ever had a parent tell me that they wished they had started working with us later. And in fact, very, very frequently, and probably they don't tell us that if we don't give them the opportunity, right? But very, very frequently our clients say, we wish we'd found you earlier. So I just want to highlight that experience for you in understanding the difference between flexibility and curiosity, and how it plays in to resiliency here. Okay, so the next thing is, what do we do about it, right? What's one thing that we need to pay attention to? And I'm actually going to give you two skill sets that I want you to be focusing on in helping your child's brain wire itself for resiliency. Obviously, this is something that we teach our clients to do more intensely than in just a quick podcast, but I want you to really pay attention to the principles here, because you can make some serious shifts in your family if you follow what we teach at the principle level and apply it. So first thing is that you know how to obviously observe that sensitivity isn't a weakness. If your child's not demonstrating resiliency as a strength, then that's where your child's struggle is, not in the fact that they are highly sensitive. That's number one. That's a mentality shift that you have to make in order to see what's possible for your kid. Secondly, is to be able to demonstrate your own level of stress management, because if you lose it on a daily basis or even on a weekly basis as a parent, as an adult, then it is likely that your standards for emotion management are not at the level that your child needs them to be. I'm just going to call it tight. I don't sugarcoat here. You're not going to hear me tell you everything's hunky-dory if it's not. You can trust that from myself and my team, that we will call a spade and call it out. Now, that's important because honestly, there are so many people in today's world who are just totally satisfied living mediocre lives and feeling like it's okay to lose it and feel lost and out of control in your emotions on a weekly basis, to the point where you end up commiserating with your peers, and that feels satisfying to you. So if that feels unsettling to you, I highly suggest that you challenge your peer group, or get yourself into a peer group where that just isn't the name of the game, if you will, because there's a different level of communication that's available to you. So my foot just slipped if you're watching the show. I just got a little jolted. So that's one that is important. In terms of modeling healthy stress management, it's not just waiting until the end of the night when you can let loose. Being able to release steam on a daily basis throughout the day so that you don't boil over is an emotional management skill set. And that requires a different toolbox rather than certain tools, right? So a tool would be taking deep breaths. However, if your toolbox doesn't hold, right, your mind and your heart doesn't hold the freedom and the space for you to remember to take those deep breaths, and also systematically have that as part of your nervous system's patterns, then taking deep breaths become a nice idea that seems impossible and also doesn't work on a regular basis, right? Yeah, I know I'm supposed to breathe. Right. And then all of a sudden at the end of the night, you realize that you've been holding it all in all day, waiting for the other shoe to drop with your kid. So there's a difference between being able to know what to do and actually doing the dang thing on a daily basis. And that's the difference between information and transformation. Knowing what to do isn't doing what's supposed to be done. So when parents make this change with our team, we are able to help parents understand where the gap is between their knowledge and their action. And that's a big difference in terms of knowing what to do versus actually doing it consistently, feeling confident, and also knowing when to pivot when that particular tactic isn't actually the most appropriate tactic. Because taking deep breaths isn't often the most effective calm down skill when freaking out. When you're feeling an emotional crisis, an intense moment of emotional struggle. So, and yet it's commonly taught. So that is one. Modeling healthy stress management, observing for yourself whether or not your stress levels in parenting are too much to bear alone, and allowing yourself to be honest with yourself that you need support. And then next is being able to give your child the capacity to solve their own problems. So one of the other things that we see most parents get stuck in is walking on eggshells, really struggling with trying to suggest solution after solution to their child in managing their big emotions, right? So if this is a trap that you fall into, I really want you to pay attention to your child's ability to have what we call agency, right? Their ability to be independent and creatively solving their own problems. That is a key piece to being resilient. Noticing in your own self when you're faced with a challenge, the ability to solve your own challenge, right? So sensitive kids who are resilient curiously look at their challenges and they find their own creative solution. Your child, when they are struggling and saying, I don't want to take deep breaths don't work, I don't want to do this, I don't want to stomp it out, that doesn't work, I want to hit you, you're I'm mad at you, right? Whatever your child might be saying in that moment, they are not lacking coping skills. They're lacking resiliency. They're lacking curiosity at that point. So what's really important to understand when you're struggling in shifting this is that you can't fall into the trap that most parents fall into. Most parents will fall into the trap of trying to suggest tool after tool after tool after tool. And what happens when a child is not very curious in that moment is they are just saying over and over again, nah, that won't work, nah, that won't work, nah, that won't work, right? It's negative Nancy. You feel like your child is at that point just choosing to be miserable. And we know, right? You know that no child was put on this earth to be miserable. You know that your child is fully capable and wants to feel better and wants to and is creative and curious when they're calm, right? So the challenge isn't that your child needs a laundry list of tools. Same thing with you. It's that they don't know how to be consistent with their knowledge of tools, to take that information and move it into transformation. So if this is a challenge that you find yourself having, and it's difficult for you to move beyond the first level of change after following what we teach here on the podcast or on the show, then I do encourage you to book a call. This is one of the things that one of our clients, Dara, did. She followed the resources. She noticed some shifts, and then she acknowledged that she was able to take it to the first level, and then wanting to make some serious changes into the next level required some more support for people to see outside of her own box, right? And so this is the conversation that she had with our team. I encourage you to do the same. You can hear from Dara at this point. I'll share with you her video on this show, and then we will move into my invitation to you. Here's Dara. We'll let her take it away.
My name is Dara, and I am here on a MTC Mastery retreat. And before we found boot camp, I felt desperate and hopeless, and very concerned about my future, my family's future. We started boot camp within a week of finding the free program, the free podcasts and videos, and we noticed results immediately, even before we started boot camp, with some of the advice we were following from the videos. Some of the measurable results that we've seen. There was a huge shift in the family dynamic, particularly with how my husband and daughter related to one another. That allowed my nervous system to regulate better. So for our whole family dynamic to start to fall into place and work together and have more cohesive, better days. I would definitely recommend the program to other families. It has been a game changer. We went within a short time from boot camp to mastery. We're very glad that we did. It's been one of the best decisions I've made in my life.
Dara and her husband came in to work with us about a year ago for their 9-year-old at the time, who was having on average a meltdown a day, which we know is not developmentally appropriate beyond the age of 4. So it was a 5-year gap we had to close. And one of the biggest challenges that Dara had with her husband was that they were not on the same page. They both wanted their daughter to thrive and to creatively solve her problems and connect. And yet where they got most stuck was in Dara's ability to trust that her husband, Aaron, understood her daughter. So she never felt like she could relax. She never felt like she could pass the baton. And that obviously impacted their marriage. And Aaron, same thing, felt like he wasn't able to connect to his daughter, and he wanted to really raise his level of education, of child development, and make that connection in a way that the three of them could thrive. So they traveled to see us. This is where we got to see Dara in the show here. You see she's outside. We were at our mastery event. We run that for our mastermind clients once a year. They bring their family. We have ninja camp. The kids are having a blast learning and observing how they are sensitive superheroes. And then the parents get a great chance to really be in a community where everybody's parenting in a similar fashion. Everybody's honoring their child's sensitivities. They're using the language that we teach. They're practicing the skills. As coaches, we get to observe how the clients are interacting with their children. So it's a great real life, real world litmus test. Now, Dara and Aaron, they had tried mental health therapy for their daughter. They tried occupational therapy for their daughter. And one of the things that I see so frequently with parents of sensitive kids, and we hear all the time parents calling us, is that the child is in these sessions and kiddo is not demonstrating real world life existence. So the therapist might say, oh, well, they're not talking to me, so we're just going to play. And as a registered play therapist supervisor, I totally get it, right? Like I get that can be an option, but for highly sensitive kids, it is really, really ineffective. And so when Dara contacted us, the words, I'll read them here from her application. She said, I am a very dedicated parent and amazingly frustrated that big improvement is taking so long. She knew there was something missing. She and her husband were very clear that they needed more support and that they didn't need to be miserable for 6 months to a year trying to turn this around with a different approach. Even beyond that, with most families, this family had been working on it for that long prior to hiring a professional. They didn't want to continue to throw spaghetti at the wall with the professionals they'd hired and see how this shakes out. So obviously with our work, we were able to help them turn this around a lot faster. They saw a very quick result. One of their celebrations within 2 weeks of working with us was that they were able to stop the meltdown cycle. The daily meltdowns had ceased. They were able to quickly turn around the interaction just by preventing them. And then we taught them how to help their daughter prevent them herself, where she felt settled. As you see here, Dara's learned a lot about her nervous system and how she's contributing to the environment. They teach that to their daughter now. We all have a common language in the household where everybody understands how the body works, how the mind works, and how that impacts your emotions. And isn't that the best way to learn and grow, to really understand yourself in order to follow through on your goals? And this is what she is able to achieve with her family. So blessed to be able to serve Dara and her husband and watch her daughter thrive. She was a treat getting to see her. She was spewing all kinds of. They're watching Shark Week on their trip here. She was giving me all kinds of facts, schooling me on my shark knowledge. It was really fun. All right, so this is the end of Dara's interview, and I have more to say about what's available to you as a parent of a highly sensitive child. So if you are ready to have that conversation with our team to figure out where your challenges are, to break out of any barriers that you might be having in stopping the meltdowns for good, especially if your child is over the age of 4, because it's not developmentally appropriate for your child to be having daily meltdowns at this point, then I encourage you to book a call with our team. Go ahead over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk and let's have a conversation. We can talk to you about what you're stuck on. Where are the gaps? But like we just mentioned earlier, it might not be that your kid doesn't know the coping skills or doesn't demonstrate calm in public situations. It's the fact that they lose it when they're spent. And if that's also happening for you, then there's a clear barrier to your ability to teach beyond your own skill set to your kid, right? And I'm not here to judge you. Obviously, none of this is your fault. All you need is more support. Now that you know that you can't teach your kid beyond your own skill set, it's time to level up your skill set and then also teach it to your child while recognizing that nobody deserves to be miserable. And I know you know, and I know you don't want to be a parent who just straight up loses it with their kids, right? Like that's just not your standard. And yet, if that's what's happening in your household, then it's time to make a change. Now that you know better, it's your responsibility to do better. Happy to talk to you about whether or not that actually makes sense to work with our team. Obviously, I am not going to tell you to work with our team if it is not a good fit, because we only do one particular thing. We have parents of sensitive kids who are either highly sensitive to their trait or they also fit criteria for ADHD, neurodivergence, and other ways. and stop the meltdown cycle, stop the overreactivity, stop the intensity in that level, and also hone their strengths so that they're not imploding, judging themselves, telling themselves that they're the worst, or telling you, who's there to help them, that you're the worst. Don't buy it. All right, you just need more skills, and obviously we can discuss what it would look like to work with our team. And if it's not a fit, then I will be sharing with you what sort of either therapy modality or resources you need to access on your own before or instead of working with us. Happy to have that conversation with you. Again, meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk and book a call. Talk to you soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye now.